Hey everybody, welcome to St Stephen's Online. We hope you enjoy catching up on our talk from Sunday.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Lauren, for inviting me to come and introduce myself. Yeah, that's awkward, isn't it? Because some of you will have known me for a long time. I've been a member of the church here for over 25 years. And some of you have never seen me before and saying, who is this guy? So for both of you, I've got something to say. And that is this. All of you Sanskrit scholars, any Sanskrit scholars here today? Really? You've stayed home? Okay. But for all of you Sanskrit scholars, you will know that my name means, my name is Jyoti, by the way, in case you didn't get it first time around. My name means light. Oh. Yeah? Isn't that nice? What you don't know, almost all of you, is that that's not my name. That's what you call me. I have another name, which is my name. That's the short form of it. My name, my full name, is Jyotirmoy. And there's a good reason why you don't call me that, because I think most of you will have no idea how to say it. So Jyotirmoy, for all of you Sanskrit specialists, what you will know is that means full of light. Can you imagine having to live up to that? I'm so happy you do not know your Sanskrit. But what it tells me is that when we have God with us, light, oh my goodness, that puts lots of pressure on the preacher. And I'm thinking, poor old Libby, she's going to have to find someone who does God with us grace or God with us hope. So presumably, that's why we pay her the big bucks, right? She can find the right person to give the message. You know what? We are looking at a passage today that I think most of you who have been going to church for a long time will think, yeah, we've heard this before. So perhaps we'll have a short message. That could be. Could be. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders. We know this stuff. But how many of us know the kind of backstory to this? And today, we're going to look a little bit at where this stuff came from. So we're looking at a time when this man Isaiah, who is a prophet in his day, and for those of you who are thinking, what is a prophet anyway? A prophet like Isaiah, and his wife, by the way, his wife was a prophetess. They were prophets because they told us what God was thinking. And in many instances, they shared something of God's heart, but also God's vision of where things were going. And so Isaiah is a prophet around about 700 BC, so 700 years before Christ, and even more than that. And Isaiah comes along and has these words to share, and we'll get them on the slide. And this is where Isaiah 9 starts. And he's talking about the fact that the Lord will humble the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. And Isaiah makes this very interesting statement. He says, in the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. Now we look at that and think, yeah, at some point, that happened to the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Where are Zebulun and Naphtali anyway? Well, they are in the northern bit of Israel. So this is a bit of Israel that was very close to the border. And the border that they had was with Assyria. And Assyria was the superpower of the day. And Assyria was not a friendly superpower. Assyria was an aggressive superpower, keen to do the worst that they possibly could to the people of Israel. So the people of Israel, and especially the people who lived in northern Israel, in the land of Zebulun and in the land of Naphtali, feared what was to come, because they actually thought this enemy is going to come and take us down. And it created a time in Israel where they were asking the question, God, why are you letting this happen? In fact, God, are you there? Where are you? These people are going to come and hammer us. What are you going to do about it? But I want you to note this. When Isaiah wrote the words, in the past he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, what scholars tell us is that it hadn't happened. So when he wrote in the past, he was looking ahead with the vision that God gave him and the certainty that this was going to happen. I wonder how Isaiah's words landed with the people at the time, where they'd say, this man is nuts. He is totally nuts, because he's talking about something that has never happened. He says, in the past, God humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. That's not happened. What is he talking about? But Isaiah would have also said to them the next thing. So if you go on to the next slide, it starts, chapter 9, verse 1 starts with this. It says, nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Now, this is kind of crazy for us looking at this, because we're just looking at history and thinking, okay, so God humbled Zebulun and Naphtali, and then he honored Galilee of the sea. It would have landed really badly in that day because it hadn't happened. And it would have landed really badly, the next bit about God honoring Galilee of the nations would have landed really badly as well, as people would be reading from Isaiah. Because the trouble with Galilee is that it was in northern Israel, in the land, the ancient lands of Zebulun and Naphtali. And when Assyria came, which they did, and when they hammered northern Israel, which they did, they actually took a whole bunch of the people who lived there, carted them off into exile, and they brought some of their own people. So Galilee, Zebulun, Naphtali, was filled with people who were not Jews. Which is why Galilee is described in this passage as Galilee of the nations. Because whenever you read the word nations in the Old Testament, it means everybody else, not Israel. Israel is the nation, God's chosen nation, but the nations were everybody else, the Gentiles. So somehow or the other, Isaiah was seeing through these eyes that God had given him, these prophetic eyes, he was seeing that the land of northern Israel was going to be humbled, and he could see that Galilee would be filled with people who were of the nations. They were Gentiles. How? Because when the exile happened, Assyria brought people from outside Israel to come and live there. So many years later, you've got this man being introduced to this person of Jesus, and his name was Nathanael. And a friend of Nathanael's was saying to him, come, listen to this man Jesus from Nazareth, and Nathanael saying, what do you mean, listen to Jesus of Nazareth? Why would I want to do that? What good has ever come out of Nazareth? Why would he say that? Because Nazareth was in the ancient land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Nazareth was a place filled with the Gentiles. What good could come from Nazareth? So you can see where my story is going. So, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations. So he's going to humble Zebulun and Naphtali, and yet he's going to honor Galilee of nations by way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Because the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. on those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. What a beautiful statement. For people living in darkness, a light has dawned. And this is kind of the moment that you can think the Jews would have been looking back, even to the moment of creation. Because you've got this moment of you've got this darkness brooding. And then the light dawns. That's the first thing that comes. The act of God is bringing light into darkness. And that's what Isaiah is seeing, that in a land of darkness, in a land where the people have either been thrown out of the land or they're living in heavy hardship, a light has dawned. What does this light look like? Well, let's look further into Isaiah 9. And the next bit says, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. I have to say this. It's a really weird way of talking about the light. Some child is going to show up. Isn't it? Doesn't it feel like a little bit inadequate? You've got Assyria, a powerful nation, and God's response is, well, there's going to be a light. A child will be born. This is the story of Advent. Adventus, for those of you who are not Sanskrit scholars but know this other language. The arrival, the coming. A child is born, a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. I like the way Isaiah connects this because he's talking to people for whom the government is not the government they want. The government is absolutely the government of the enemy. So what's special about this child is that the government will be on his shoulders. But there's more. He tells us, the next slide please. He tells us something about this child. He will be called Wonderful Counselor. Now, for many of us, or at least for some of us, for me growing up, this was these words I associate with Handel's Messiah. So do you remember that? For unto us a son is given, unto us a child is... I'm not going to sing this for you, by the way, but I'm giving you the rhythm of it just to remind you. Unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful. And for whatever reason, it stops there. Do you remember that? He stops there. He'll be called Wonderful Counselor. And so, as a kid, we used to sing this song, His name is Wonderful, His name is Counselor. It's like, for goodness sake, that's just the same name, okay? Wonderful Counselor. So I blame Handel, okay, for how we've got this so wrong. But listen to how this will land when Isaiah talks about it. He says, he will be called Wonderful Counselor. Isn't that great? We're going to have someone for whom the government will be resting on his shoulders, and he's a wonderful counselor. I like that. He also uses the word Prince of Peace. Wow. In a place that is torn up by war, Prince of Peace sounds great. By the way, Isaiah, what is wrong with you? Mighty God, everlasting Father, and you're saying he's a child? Have you not read Deuteronomy? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, Adonai God, is one. I think they must have been a little bit confused. So we're going to get the light, God's light, shining on us. And he's going to be called Mighty God. A little child. What are you talking about, Isaiah? He's going to be called Everlasting Father. When does the child get to be called Everlasting Father? You're using words, Isaiah, that I don't think you can use. That would have been the advice he got from his legal team. But I think he's using them because God is showing him this child is a special child. This child is like no other. The government will be on his shoulders. So when we are in a place of darkness, and God says a wonderful light will shine, what we hear about is that when Jesus shows up, John describes him as the light of the world. By the way, if you read a Hindi Bible, it's Jagat Ki Jyoti, because it is my name, light, okay? Just to keep that in play. So light of the world. And you know what John says? The darkness cannot overcome it. That's this Jesus we're talking about. And you know the other amazing thing about this Jesus? He was born in the most humble circumstances. He was born in a place called Bethlehem, and his family took him to Nazareth, and he had his ministry in the ancient lands of Zebulun and Naphtali, in the land we call Galilee by the sea. Isaiah knew what he was talking about. He knew that God had a plan, and that plan was going to bring a marvelous, marvelous light, and that light would banish all darkness. So that was what Jesus was going to bring. That's the vision that Isaiah saw of this one who was to come. But when Jesus came, he told us more. He said, it's not finished now. He said he was going to come back. And when he came back, the description he gives is not of cattle lowing in the stable. It's not of the sheep and the shepherds and the angels singing, glory to God in the highest and peace to all men. That's not what he gives. Instead, look at the next slide. Because what Jesus says when he comes back is nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. Actually, this could have sounded pretty familiar to the people of Zebulun and Naphtali. Nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There came a point in about the 19th century where people were looking at the world around them and thinking, things are going really well. So when we read the stuff that Jesus says that nation will rise against nation, surely somebody must have added that later. There's no way Jesus would have said this, because nation will not be rising against nation, will there? They obviously hadn't lived in the 20th century or the 21st century, where today nation is rising against nation, where kingdom rises against kingdom. There'll be earthquakes in various places. You know, in the King James Version, it says earthquakes in diverse places. And this phrase always stuck with me as a child, because I'd be reading the Bible and read about earthquakes in diverse places. And in the King James, it's spelled diverse, D-I-V-E-R-S. And I'd be thinking, why would the earthquakes be restricted to those places the divers go to? It made zero sense to me as a child. And probably still doesn't make that much sense. But still, you're going to have to live with me here for the next few minutes. So earthquakes in various places and famines. The picture that Jesus is painting is not a world of comfort. Light hasn't yet won out against darkness. That is why he's coming back. So I want to ask you the question today. Is there darkness in your life? Yesterday I was went to visit one of my wife's relatives, and she's near the end of her life. And so when we left, we didn't know if we would ever see her again. That looks like darkness to me. Earlier in the week, I was at Westminster, and I was attending the National Emergency Briefing. which described what our country is going to look like in the light of the climate emergency. And thanks to our addiction to fossil fuel, we are going to be going through the kind of time where I was just listening to them talk and think, my kids will be living in this. How do I feel about that? And what am I doing? Maybe for you, darkness is because you are actually walking a road where you have a health threat on your lives or on the life of somebody who is close to you. Maybe darkness looks like the loss of a job. Maybe darkness looks like you have a job and you still can't pay the bills. And what Jesus says is that he's coming back. There will be a second advent. The first advent sets us up for the second advent. And so I want to share this with you because in the Bible, it tells us how the story ends. It tells us how this story that Isaiah was talking about, which is in the ancient lands of Zebulun and Naphtali, there will be a light shining because this man Jesus will be walking around Galilee of the nations by way of the sea. Jesus tells us what happens. And I always go back to one of my most favorite passages in Scripture, Revelation 21, because it is the end of his story there. It's the end of history, the end of his story as well. And here's how John describes it. He says, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. Do you remember the name of this of this sermon today? It's God with us. That's what this is about. God's dwelling place is with us, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. What is this darkness going to look like when the light is shining? He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. That is the promise of Advent. And the certainty for me in this is that Isaiah saw that before it had happened. And he saw the coming of this baby. And this baby is going to be the baby that will come again when nation rises against nation, when we have famine, when we have fire, whatever the darkness, he is returning. And I think for us, in moments of darkness, in moments of strife, when we cannot see what happens next and we wonder, God, where are you? In fact, God, do you even exist? We can be confident of this. He has a plan. He's working it out. And when we see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, our redemption is nigh.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found that encouraging. Have a great week and see you soon.